when it said multiverse and new atheism. I'm like, what a combination that is. Let's talk.
Nice. Yeah, so I think like it's interesting to think why philosophers need to think about the multiverse, right? It tends to be like a theory thrown about by physicists and stuff. But I think at the moment, we don't want to be talking about philosophy as a society. We're like stuck in this idea of scientism, the view that science can solve all of these problems and questions. So you've probably heard people like Lawrence Krauss or Dawkins, Stephen Hawking, Brian Cox. They all say something along the lines of like philosophy is dead. So just before we get into the multiverse, it's probably best to say like what philosophy is and and what the point of talking about the multiverse is. So this is something I ask every philosopher I speak to, like what they take philosophy to be, because it's really interesting to see how all the ideas they discuss fall into their wider projects. And one of the ideas that I love is this one by the late, great British philosopher Mary Midgley. She likens philosophy to a kind of plumbing, right? So like we have these conversations in our societies, and like these conversations are flowing around, and likewise we have these pipes running underneath our houses keeping the water flowing, but occasionally it gets clogged, and so the philosopher needs to pull up the floorboards, see what the clog is, and help the conversation move along again. So these are things like what it is to be a woman, or what it is to have free speech, or what it means to say that a gene is selfish. So that's, I see, like the primary job of the philosopher, something we're all doing every day, like trying to understand the concepts we're using. But then also there's this bigger aspect of philosophy, which is like how it all hangs together in the broadest possible sense of the term. Like, let's put all of the pieces of the puzzle together from physics, biology, and the arts, and let's try and get a big picture of the world. And if we're missing a piece of the puzzle, let's have our best guess about what that piece could be. So I take that to be the project. And so the questions that come out of that, the questions that philosophy asks are things like, why is there something, a universe, rather than nothing, no universe? Like, why are the laws of nature fine-tuned for the existence of life? Where does consciousness come from? Like, when I make a moral statement like the Holocaust is bad, is it the same as me saying that Jonah Hill's movies are bad? Like, are they the same kind of statement? Is that the same bad I'm using?
Right.
But the big question, and to get to the multiverse now, is the big question for me and how all of my work seems to explore this fundamental question. The French Algerian philosopher Albert Camus said the fundamental question of philosophy is whether life is or is not worth living. Like, so my question is, what's the point of all this?
Right.
Is existence on the whole a good thing? Should we be happy and pleased to be alive? And what's the purpose of life? And so that's where the multiverse, new atheism, and these arguments for theism all come into the project.
I think it's ridiculous to dismiss philosophy because you are a proponent of science. Like, just that reductionist perspective, the idea that thinking about things and developing, for lack of a better term, a philosophy, developing your own personal philosophy, taking from the accounts of others and their perspectives and their interesting, unique view of the world that we live in. The idea that that's not significant or important, to me, seems pretty silly.
Yeah,
it's silly. Like,
I don't know how they get away with saying these things. Like, I think you get it though, right? Like, science splits the atom; it puts man on the moon. Like, so it seems like it's going to solve all these problems. But
right, but the human beings that took place in the experiments that led to the splitting of the atom all had to have some sort of a philosophy that they managed their life by.
Yeah.
They had to have something that allowed them to have the discipline to commit to their schooling, to follow through with the project. They're especially think about Oppenheimer's struggle that he had with this thing that he had created that was ultimately going to lead to destruction of hundreds of thousands of lives, if not the entire human race itself.
Right. Yeah.
Which was very deeply based in philosophy, like his perspective and his struggles with it. I mean, if he was just like an automaton, like some, sociopathic, just super Alzheimer's guy, or that didn't not autism guy, rather, that didn't think at all about no concept at all about empathy, no concept at all about our perspective in the he would just plow forth ahead and just launch bombs. Like, that's. But the science depends on human beings that have a unique way of thinking, and how does that not come out of philosophy?